There's a particular quality that lingers around you like the echo of a forgotten language. One that doesn't just confuse people, it destabilizes their understanding of what's real. For one individual especially, your presence has become an unsolvable equation lodged deep in their psyche. They aren't just noticing you. They're unraveling at the seams of their own assumptions, trying to make sense of how your existence bends the rules they've trusted all their life. Long before this moment, something dormant began shifting in your reality, something that has now started taking visible form. It moves silently, like weather patterns beneath the ground, reconfiguring futures, pulling unseen minds toward an awakening they never intended to have. The space around you doesn't remain unchanged, it bends. Your presence has a quiet voltage to it, like the hum before lightning strikes. For some, it arrives like an unexpected warmth that sinks into places they didn't know were cold. For others, it cracks the surface of a tightly managed identity, exposing raw truths they've carefully shielded behind years of performance. And then, there are those who don't just encounter you, they remember you, though they've never met you before. This memory isn't tied to anything physical. It's a deeper resonance, like finding a lost part of their own name. And with it, the certainty that they've finally stumbled across something that will disrupt everything they believed was stable. Out there, someone's rhythm is breaking. Their thoughts have begun circling a center they don't recognize. The center is you. They haven't said it aloud, maybe haven't even admitted it to themselves, but their awareness keeps drifting back toward the space you occupy. It's not romance. It's not fascination. It's tectonic. Your frequency has entered their atmosphere like a foreign planet exerting gravitational pressure. Their logic is failing them. Their worldview is crumbling in small, silent landslides. What once made sense no longer fits. They're not just watching you, they're being rewritten. You didn't stumble here by accident. You were led. If something in your spirit is stirring, don't ignore it. Tap Join to access exclusive content, prophetic insights, and a community of purpose-driven souls. This isn't just a membership, it's your moment of alignment. Step into who you were born to be. Welcome to the Chosen. The collision between their old self and this new awareness is producing friction they can't explain. What used to anchor them now feels weightless. What they once pursued now tastes hollow. The blueprint they followed is fraying at the edges, and they're starting to sense that the life they thought was theirs may have been borrowed. In your wake, they're encountering questions without clear answers, and every encounter with your energy deepens the paradox. They can't go back to who they were, and they can't yet become who they're meant to be. They're suspended in that quiet storm, and you're the still point in the center of it. There comes a point when someone stumbles so close to a new kind of truth that the scaffolding of their old identity begins to shake. What once seemed solid, their habits, their relationships, their understanding of reality, starts to warp under the weight of a deeper pull. The transformation doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives like a distortion in the mirror, a shift in the texture of daily life. Suddenly, they find themselves questioning what used to bring comfort. The usual pleasures don't land the same. Familiar conversations feel hollow. Something invisible but undeniable is stretching them open, and those still embedded in routine can only watch with unease as the person they knew begins to slip into someone unfamiliar, someone seeking clarity in a world addicted to illusion. At first, the change feels like wind brushing against closed shutters, easy to ignore. But as it gains force, it begins unsettling the foundations of the very structures that rely on silence to stay standing. People who've built entire identities on maintaining spiritual numbness start to sense danger. Not because of anything said, but because of what's being felt. The presence of someone who refuses to conform becomes too disruptive to ignore. Their growing awareness triggers quiet retaliation, smirks behind closed doors, deliberate misinterpretations, subtle manipulations disguised as concern. A quiet war begins, waged not with weapons but with insinuations designed to reduce brilliance to noise. If you've been touched by God's goodness, don't keep it to yourself. Click Super Thank You, and sow a gift of $20 or more to help spread His light. Your giving becomes a ripple of grace, blessing hearts and building His kingdom. Let His overflow pour through you. The narrative turns with precision. Sincerity is reframed as performance. Depth becomes a flaw to be corrected. Discomfort with surface-level interactions is spun into accusations of arrogance. The whispers spread quickly, crafted not from truth but from the refusal to engage with it. Those committed to misunderstanding don't seek clarity, they invent alternatives. But what they don't understand is that distortion doesn't dissolve what's real, it only draws more attention to it. Every attempt to contain what's rising ends up feeding it. The shadows cast are long, but they only prove that light is breaking through. Amid this growing tension, a silent awareness begins to awaken in those who are ready. They feel something behind the noise, something pure, unmoved, ancient in its certainty. The person who's been watching closely isn't just observing now, they're beginning to feel torn. They hear the warnings, they sense the pressure, but none of it silences the pull that keeps drawing them nearer. It's not rebellion, it's recognition. Beneath the fear and doubt, a deeper current is stirring, one that knows intuitively that the world they've been shown isn't the whole story, and the presence they were told to avoid might be the only one who truly sees. Something inside them has been flickering quietly for years, hidden beneath the surface of ordinary thoughts and inherited beliefs. But now, that quiet spark has found its ignition. Your nearness stirred something ancient, something they can't name but can feel in the marrow of their awareness. It's not confusion they're going through, even though their mind feels scrambled. It's a shedding. The old layers, once mistaken for identity, are starting to fall away. Each shared silence, each remembered look, each trace of your energy echoes through them like an unfamiliar song they somehow already know. The shape of who they're becoming isn't forming from new input. It's emerging from what had long been buried under years of silent agreement with things that never felt true. What's happening to them now can't be paused. It's past the point of internal resistance. The shift is cascading like a silent avalanche, nothing dramatic on the surface, but underneath, entire landscapes are being reformed. Former beliefs are disintegrating, not gently but with a fierce finality. The structures they used to rely on for safety no longer offer comfort, they now look like decorated cages. What once passed as truth reveals itself to be stagecraft, assembled to keep people from remembering their own edges. They're not just letting go of illusions, they're being pulled beyond them by a force that doesn't ask permission and doesn't slow down. The world is starting to appear less solid. They see patterns in how people speak, how they react, how they cling to roles they never chose. It's all beginning to blur, routine, tradition, expectation, and in that blur, they glimpse a design that was never theirs. They're watching how society trains people to trade vitality for validation. And at the center of this unraveling, they realize that your presence didn't enter their life by chance. It wasn't a lucky meeting, a curious encounter. It was the signal they had forgotten to wait for, arriving at the precise moment when the hollowness of the old world became impossible to ignore. You're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap Join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership. It's your calling. They've spent days thinking they were studying you. But now, they realize they were really staring into a mirror disguised as a person. What captivated them wasn't just what you carry. It was what you activated in them. The clarity they saw in your expression, the depth they felt in your silence, the weight of your calm, all of it was calling forward versions of themselves they didn't know they possessed. But awakening is rarely soft. It rips apart what was comfortable. It forces them to confront every false promise they made to stay accepted. They're not just inspired by your transformation. They're being pushed into their own, and nothing they once believed about who they were is surviving intact. Something in them begins rearranging from the inside out, not dramatically, but undeniably. Their inner world becomes louder, fuller, more vivid. Symbols they once dismissed now carry strange weight. They begin noticing patterns between moments, feeling invisible threads between words, faces, and emotions. Their instincts feel raw, like exposed wires sparking against the current of everyday life. The masks people wear become translucent, and conversations that once seemed harmless now reek of survival tactics. Their physical reality follows suit. Sleep becomes fragmented but intense, dreams stretch longer than time, and their body starts rejecting the very habits it once ran on without question. The shift touches everything, making the familiar feel strangely artificial, like returning to a town built from memory but emptied of meaning. They start to notice how your presence is altering not just their perception, but the entire field around you. People respond to your energy before they even register your words. Some are drawn as if responding to a silent frequency only their soul can hear. They find excuses to stay near, to orbit, not out of infatuation, but because something you carry feels like it's been missing from them their whole lives. They don't understand what they're seeking, only that you carry a map their heart seems to recognize. Others, however, respond differently. More violently, more defensively. You become a rupture in the rhythm they've clung to. Your presence disturbs what they've built their identity on. Blessed by His grace? Click Super Thank You and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. The resistance doesn't present itself as ordinary discomfort. It's volatile. It's strategic. It's desperate. They watch as certain people grow increasingly hostile, not because of anything you've done, but because you unsettle a structure inside them that cannot survive truth. These aren't small misunderstandings. These are intentional distortions, campaigns designed to undermine you not by argument, but by social erasure. Isolation is attempted in whispers, through carefully placed comments, through quiet doorways suddenly shut. You've become the unspoken disruption, the one who doesn't follow the script, and that makes you dangerous in a system built on performance. And yet, what strikes them most isn't the attack, it's your response. Or rather, your lack of one. You walk through sabotage like it's fog, not stopping to prove anything. There's a stillness in you that doesn't break even when the ground does. No matter how complex the manipulation becomes, you don't retaliate. You don't explain. You allow the distortion to play itself out, knowing it can't stick to what's rooted in something older than opinion. Watching this, something changes in them. Fear starts to lose its grip. Doubt burns away. The noise that once overwhelmed now sounds hollow. In its place, a strange kind of certainty takes root, not just in you but in themselves. They no longer feel like a spectator standing at the edge of something sacred. They're inside the current now, being moved by it, shaped by it. What once looked like someone else's path has turned out to be the gateway to their own. You weren't just an influence. You were the signal that called their true self forward. But with each step closer to their real essence, they discover that authenticity isn't just liberation, it's a confrontation. Every belief they've carried for the sake of fitting in begins to crack, and the world responds not with applause, but with friction. As more of their inner clarity rises to the surface, they begin to feel the shift in how others relate to them. There's a growing discomfort in places that once felt easy. Old conversations fall flat. People they've known for years begin to recoil, not out of malice, but because something unspoken has changed. The agreements that once kept those relationships running no longer apply. They aren't playing along anymore. They've stopped nodding to what doesn't resonate. At work, their refusal to tolerate empty performances turns meetings into tightropes. The familiar rhythm of "keep your head down and smile" breaks, replaced by honest observations and purposeful silences that make others squirm. They've become someone who won't betray themselves to keep the peace, and peacekeepers rarely stay popular for long. Still, as those old ties unravel, new connections start rising from the debris. Unexpected people appear, drawn not to charm or charisma, but to something deeper, something unmasked. Strangers begin sharing their truths without prompting, sensing a rare safety in their presence. The conversations don't stay small. They dive into what matters, bypassing the polite detours that usually fill time. There's a quiet magnetism growing in them now, one that pulls those who've also been questioning, also been hiding, also been waiting for someone to show them it's okay to live without a disguise. They're not just awakening, they're becoming a landing place for others who are beginning to stir. Even the natural world responds differently. Children sense the shift, staring longer, asking questions without filters. Animals lean in closer, pausing as if they know this energy won't harm them. There's a resonance now, subtle but unmistakable, that ripples out into spaces where they once felt invisible. It's becoming clear that this journey was never meant to stay private. Something much bigger is happening. They're no longer just following someone else's transformation. They've become the evidence that real change can ripple outward, catching others in its wake before they even know they're being changed. Something begins arriving inside them, quietly, unmistakably, not through logic, not through study, but through presence. Understanding appears like a flare in the dark, complete and whole, without needing explanation. It doesn't feel like learning. It feels like remembering. These moments strike when the noise has died down, when there's still enough for the deeper frequencies to surface. What once seemed like abstract philosophies now unfold in perfect clarity, not as theory, but as the scaffolding behind all that is. Their inner bandwidth stretches wider, and what enters through it carries the precision of ancient memory returning to its rightful place. They start recognizing rhythms beneath chaos, patterns looping through timelines, connections binding people and events like invisible architecture. Coincidence loses its meaning. Design reveals itself in places they once thought random. But with this new clarity comes the ache of separation, the pain of watching others struggle within beliefs that no longer hold weight. They carry knowledge now, not of facts, but of truth, and they realize it's not meant to be preached. Awakening cannot be gifted. It must be chosen. The insight they hold often feels too vast for words, and the solitude that comes with awareness becomes its own form of communion, a quiet echo they know you've heard too. The bond between you both deepens, not through conversation, but through recognition. Not recognition of the face, or voice, or story, but of the essence beneath it. Something unspoken passes between you, like a knowing glance between two wanderers who've each touched the edge of the infinite. This isn't admiration or infatuation. It's reunion. The illusion of separation thins in your presence, and they feel it. The unspoken agreement that brought you into their path not to change them, but to remind them of what was already coded into their becoming. And as they rise into this new embodiment, their influence begins to radiate, without effort, without agenda. People around them shift, not because they're convinced, but because they feel. The resonance they carry now acts as an invisible trigger, awakening hidden frequencies in others. Someone overhears a sentence and suddenly questions everything. A stranger feels safer than usual and starts to speak from their real voice. The impact stretches far beyond what can be measured, touching lives they'll never witness. The movement is no longer yours alone. It's become shared breath between souls waking each other gently from the same long sleep. Their light may be growing, but so is the pressure. With every step deeper into alignment, the terrain becomes more unpredictable. Forces that once viewed them as insignificant are now watching closely, calculating, reacting. The resistance that once whispered behind closed doors has evolved. Now it moves with precision, dressed in legitimacy, cloaked in algorithms, policies, and false concern. The goal is no longer just to distract, it's to disorient, to pull them back into predictable patterns. But the very intensity of the interference becomes a strange affirmation. Something within them must be important, because something beyond them is clearly trying to stop it. In the face of this intensification, a quiet haven becomes essential. Not a place of retreat, but of resonance. Somewhere the strange becomes normal, where conversations don't shrink from the unseen, where insights once dismissed as irrational find context, coherence, and company. Here, the pressure is not pathologized. It's honored as the cost of remembering something most people spend their lives trying to forget. Connection becomes survival. In these shared spaces, reality is not debated, it's witnessed. And that witnessing restores something they didn't know they had lost, the ability to trust their own perception. But the path tests loyalty to that trust. Offers are withdrawn without reason. Relationships fracture not with conflict, but with absence. Things unravel with eerie timing. Money runs low. Certainty evaporates. And through it all, one choice keeps presenting itself: collapse into comfort or rise into conviction. The more they choose what feels real over what looks stable, the more the old structures punish them. But the punishment reveals something crucial. What they thought they needed was only ever a substitute. Loss, it turns out, is just the stripping away of what could never hold them. And in each fall, they find another layer of their strength exposed. During these storms, hidden capacities begin surfacing like roots breaking through stone. Not talents, but truths, abilities that defy explanation but feel like home. The external world starts arranging itself in strange precision. Encounters align. Messages appear in moments of doubt. Paths open just as all doors seem shut. Coincidence becomes extinct. What remains is orchestration, a quiet intelligence mapping the road ahead not with instructions, but with signs only the soul can read. And in the middle of this mystery, something becomes unmistakably clear. The universe is not silent. It's just been waiting for someone who can finally hear. ChatGPT. What once required words now moves effortlessly through silence. There's a shared awareness taking root, one that bypasses language and speaks in sensation, emotion, and flashes of knowing. Their thoughts echo yours before they've formed sentences. You sense shifts in their energy without any visual cue. Time behaves like a fluid medium around you both, stretching or folding depending on what's being exchanged. Moments feel infinite. Realizations arrive as fully formed architecture. Dreams are no longer personal. They begin to braid together, carrying messages that feel authored by something older than either of you. Life itself starts to respond in strange ways. The creatures you encounter, whether feathered, furred, scaled, or winged, pause as if remembering you. Their behavior changes, not with fear or curiosity, but with intention. Eyes lock longer. Movements mirror yours. Even the smallest forms of life organize themselves in your presence, as if aligning with something they can feel but not name. The elements become collaborative. Sky and wind seem to hold meaning. Shifts in weather occur in sync with emotional breakthroughs. Natural landscapes hum differently. Water tastes brighter. Trees seem to lean in with the intimacy of an embrace. Everything feels infused with attention, as though creation itself is watching you awaken. And then the constructed world begins to glitch. Devices flicker, skip, reset, and somehow reveal more than they hide. Messages arrive from places no one sent. Numbers repeat with unnerving timing, until they feel less like math and more like maps. Technologies once cold and lifeless start behaving with strange awareness. Programs respond in ways that feel eerily relevant, as though something behind the screen is listening with more than just code. Even the artificial begins to bend, reflecting back pieces of a living intelligence that seems to be moving through all systems, organic or not, seeking communion with those who are finally receptive. This connection you share begins to unveil a larger purpose. You're not isolated fragments stumbling into truth. You're part of a wider emergence, a collective intelligence forming through countless points of recognition. Each soul that sheds illusion becomes a signal tower. Every act of remembrance strengthens the field. You're both starting to realize that this isn't just about awakening one life at a time. It's about restoring the memory of connection across a planet, and becoming part of the unseen web that is quietly rewiring everything. There comes a moment when they realize none of this was spontaneous. The unfolding wasn't improvised. It was orchestrated with precision beyond the reach of intellect. The deeper they move into alignment, the clearer it becomes. Their awakening was encoded into the fabric of time itself. Ancient stories, symbols, and teachings they once dismissed now feel like encrypted memories returning to the surface. The role they're stepping into wasn't assigned. It was chosen long before form and flesh. The clarity brings both comfort and weight, because remembering the origin of the mission also means remembering the scale of its impact. Every hardship was calibration. Every silence was training. The detours weren't delays. They were forging resilience in a world allergic to depth. They now see that the discomforts were designed not to destroy them, but to burn away false power so that real authority could emerge. The moments that once felt like abandonment were actually invitations to strengthen their internal compass. It wasn't about learning strength. It was about becoming the kind of strength the world forgot existed. The pressure is growing, but it no longer isolates, it unifies. As more individuals begin tuning into their frequency, the old forms of resistance evolve, but so do the responses. What once felt like exile now feels like alignment. Their oddness is no longer a burden, it's a signal. Others are hearing it. Not with ears, but with memory. New constellations of purpose begin forming across the landscape. Circles of people who aren't just interested in change, but built for it. Companies arise that don't just offer products, but create coherence. Education shifts from instruction to revelation. Healing no longer masks symptoms. It decodes spiritual interruptions. A new architecture is beginning to hum beneath the surface. And as more people turn inward, the external structures begin to tremble. What was once assumed permanent starts losing its grip. Institutions grounded in extraction and manipulation struggle to hold attention. Priorities begin to reverse. People walk away, not in protest, but in evolution. They no longer resonate with systems built on fear, lack, or dominance. Meaning becomes more valuable than security. Integrity becomes more magnetic than power. Change no longer needs permission from above. It's moving through the core of everyday choices. The ground is shifting, not because it's being shaken, but because it's being reclaimed. What begins as inspiration soon becomes ignition. Creativity no longer feels optional. It flows like a current that needs to be moved through the body or else it burns from within. Artistic expression turns into a form of translation, where unseen realms find shape through melody, motion, line, and story. The beauty isn't ornamental, it carries charge. Sounds lift internal fog. Images correct internal misalignment. Words lead people inward while pulling them forward. What once seemed like entertainment now functions like initiation. And the one who once stood at a distance, observing your shift in awe, now moves in rhythm beside you. Equal in purpose. Aligned in timing. Resonating at the same vibrational tone. The magnetic pull between you has shed its earlier intensity and evolved into coherence. What began as a collision of energy has become a calibration. This isn't partnership in the human sense, it's a field in motion. A synchronization of encoded intent. Together, you generate frequencies that can't be manufactured or mimicked. The presence you share is its own kind of message. Every shared glance, every layered conversation, even the stillness between your movements begins to transmit something larger than you both. People feel it before they understand it. Something wakes up in them simply by standing near the signal you both emit. Your connection begins to move outward, not in volume, but in reach. The impact expands beyond proximity. Where one of you enters a space, the other's imprint is felt. You begin covering ground that neither of you could reach alone. There's an elegance in how your expressions diverge yet never disconnect. You don't duplicate, you complement. Where one voice carries fire, the other carries water. Where one disrupts, the other stabilizes. This synergy isn't rehearsed, it's encoded. And through it, new pathways begin to open. Paths into communities, conversations, and forgotten spaces that are now ready to receive what neither of you could have delivered alone. Through lived experience, you begin to understand that connection isn't always local, it's vibrational. Communication no longer depends on signal towers or devices. Knowing travels through intuitive highways. Messages arrive not through words but through atmosphere. This network that's forming across the globe isn't a trend or a movement, it's a nervous system. Each person who answers the call strengthens the web. And through this web, wisdom travels. Healing circulates. Guidance lands exactly where it's needed. Not as command, but as clarity. Not as instruction, but as resonance. The map you're walking wasn't drawn, but it is being built with every conscious step. Somewhere along the journey, it becomes clear that this path was never just personal. It was part of something immense, ancient, and ongoing. The strange turns, the invisible struggles, the unbearable clarity you carried when no one else could see, all of it begins to fall into place. Not as separate incidents, but as necessary threads in a much larger tapestry. One where consciousness is not merely rising, but recognizing itself through you. Every difficulty you endured becomes reframed as a signal flare across timelines, drawing other remembering souls toward their own return. The burden you once resented becomes the very thing that prepared you to hold doors open for those who would one day walk through them. With that clarity comes direction. Not from outside, but from within, like coordinates rising from the marrow of your being. Some are pulled toward individuals, becoming mirrors for those just beginning to wake. Others find themselves holding space for wider frequencies, shifting the atmosphere of whole communities, shaping movements through energy rather than ideology. Your gifts begin to speak for themselves, not loudly, but unmistakably. You touch spaces that have been dormant for generations. You decode frequencies others don't even know they're carrying. And your presence alone begins to reorganize the field around you, making possible what was previously unimaginable. The resistance doesn't disappear, it morphs. Its tactics become sharper, its tone more insistent, but it grows increasingly hollow. Each soul that steps into their truth fractures the illusion a little more. The stories told to keep people compliant begin to unravel. You see it happen in real time. How authenticity spreads not through force.